Dr. Joe, firstly, thank you for coming in to have a chat with me because I know how busy you are, and it's hard to squeeze in time here and there.
Look, Ray, you're not exactly a man of leisure yourself, so we're all busy, but always a pleasure to chat with you, my friend.
Great. So today I want to talk about medical cannabis, but I want to start by talking about weed and smoking weed recreationally in general and all the health implications that it has. And I know that, smoking itself has got serious health concerns, from neurological disorders to physical dependence and all sorts of problems. And I would like your opinion on that topic, from the advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah. Look, 2 points first up. Number one, need to declare I'm medical advisor to Little Green Farmer, which is a medicinal cannabis company, and that's a role I've had for a number of years. Number two, as soon as we're talking about in Australia any use of cannabis that is not prescribed, it is illegal. So that's the first point to make. So obviously anybody who does so, it's obviously not advisable for a variety of reasons, but just before we even get to the medical side, it is illegal and people are breaking the law, and that they can risk penalties, including fines and jail times and marks on their record. There's a big difference between smoking and vaping, and we could have a whole separate conversation about vaping for tobacco harm reduction. But typically when people
Smoking and vaping weed.
Yeah, smoking or vaping anything, smoking is burning or combusting a substance, whereas vaping is heating it to liberate the vapours. So for example, if you have a cold or a flu, you might put some Vicks or some eucalypt oil onto some hot water and inhale it. So that is vaporising. So it's letting the water vapour pick up the compound and you breathe in. But you're not burning or combusting the substance. And as you know, when you burn something, it's very different to heating it. So if people... if we're talking about smoking, on the plus side, if you like, smoking cannabis is not as dangerous to the lungs as smoking cigarettes. And that's not to say that people should be smoking cannabis. And obviously we spoke about the legalities, but again, you're still combusting the substance. The more people use, and this doesn't matter whether it's cannabis, whether it's alcohol, doesn't matter what it is, the more you use, the more problematic it is. And whilst we do know that cannabis is a less addictive substance than either alcohol or tobacco, and it's actually even a little bit less addictive than caffeine, people can become addicted to it, and that can be dangerous, and it can lead to mental health problems. But there's a big difference between using appropriately, and particularly in a medical sense, and using illicitly for what might be called recreational purposes.
For the people who use in that recreationally, it is an addictive substance. And there is no safety parameters or recommendations that, if you don't have any medical conditions or you don't need to be smoking weed, that you should for any other reason.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. I suppose legally and medically on both fronts. What is interesting, and we've seen this over the last... because medicinal cannabis was legalised in this country, it's nearly 8 years ago now. What we've seen over the last 3 to 4 years, as it's gained a little bit of traction, is a number of people who have been self-medicating with cannabis. So we're seeing people, and this is not just myself, this is other prescribers, who are coming in to talk about a prescription. They've been using cannabis not to get high, which is absolutely not recommended, obviously, but they've been using it to help with sleep, with PTSD, with anxiety, or with pain, and they've been doing that because other treatments that they've used have not worked. And increasingly, and this is a good thing, these people are saying, look, I want to get into the medical market for 2 reasons. Number one, obviously, again, the legalities. Number two is when you buy on the black market, you do not know what you're getting. Medical cannabis in Australia, the restrictions, or so the regulations more correctly, are quite specific, and any product that is sold in Australia that's manufactured in Australia has to comply with GMP, which is called Good Manufacturing Practice Protocols, and it includes that there can be no pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, heavy metals. If it says it's got 10 milligrams in a mil or it's 22% THC within a flower product, THC being tetrahydrocannabinol, then it has to have that. So same as if you buy a packet of paracetamol and it says it's got 500 milligrams in a tablet, that's what it needs to have. Within a margin of error, because they're all compounds.
Yep.
But that's what it'll have. And the next bottle or pack will have the same, and the one after that, and the one after that. So you know what you're getting and you know what you're not getting. Any product that you buy on the street, well, I'm not saying
you don't know where it's coming from. You don't know what they put in it.
Yep.
You know what they freaking laced it with, or whatever it is to enhance it or to improve it. Or you've got no idea. So you're taking that risk as well, right?
That is exactly right. And also, it's not being not being monitored. So if you're not getting the response, I mean, there are a large number of medicinal cannabis products on the market at present. In fact, it could be argued that we have more than what we need. There are a lot
of options. We're going into that.
And that's good, but it's also, everything has its pluses and minuses. But if you're on a particular formulation and it isn't working for you, then if you go to the black market, well, how can they know whether they're giving you anything different? Because they don't know what they're giving you now. They might know the bloke who grew it, but that's about where it ends.
Yeah.
If you're on a medical formulation, these are the number of milligrams, this is the percentage, this isn't having the desired effect for you, or it's causing you side effects, because everything has potential side effects. We're going to change it, and we know what we're changing it to. Most doctors who are in the medicinal cannabis space and are happy to prescribe are interested to know that, because it also does inform a little bit, all right, well, why have you been doing it? What effect has it had on you? That is useful to know. There are some doctors who are very anti-cannabis, and if you tell them that, they will put up a brick wall, but they're probably not the doctors who are likely to prescribe anyway. So if you're seeing a doctor who is in that space and is open to and is a prescriber of medicinal cannabis, then it is useful to say that. So what you've been using, how much, and why. Now, the other rider is there are restrictions on prescriptions of any Schedule 8 medication. So Schedule 8 is more than 2% of the THC. Schedule 8 also includes opiates, and there are some benzodiazepine medications that are also Schedule 8, and those they're monitored by the health department. If a person is a notified or registered drug-dependent person, then they may not be able to be prescribed a Schedule 8 product without approval from a specialist and the health department. But it is still important for the doctor to know, because if they prescribe, then that script may well get refused, and that may create problems for the individual.
Correct.
So short answer, that's been a little bit longer than I intended, Ray, but short answer is yes, disclosure.
What is
important.
your opinion on that point? Is that a good thing or a bad thing that people, after disclosing that, that could expose them to delays and issues and having to go see a specialist and having to, spend a little bit more money, which potentially sometimes you don't have because specialist here is not on Medicare, obviously.
That is true. It's like everything. If you don't go down that path, and particularly now, there is a system, and every state has its own system, whereby before I can prescribe a Schedule 8 medication, a little dialog box comes up in the prescribing software with a link to, in WA it's called SafeScript, where there is monitoring of every prescription and every dispensing of a prescription that is a notified substance. So, all right, when you come in today, if I don't know about it and I give you a prescription, then that might seem simple, but the problem is going to be that I will get notified by the health department that that I've done the wrong thing, and this person cannot have medicinal cannabis, and it could be other Schedule 8s as well, and that person is going to be in trouble as well. Because so basically Big Brother is watching you. So short term, you might think, yeah, it's a problem, but anything after that, if you don't and it gets found out, it's going to be a bigger problem.
What's your take on with medical cannabis and research and?
We're moving in the right direction. There are some aspects in this country that we have gotten right, and in particular, that is a prescription rather than a license model. Now, in North America, if you go to a doctor and you can have medicinal cannabis, then you get a license, you can go to a dispensary and you have a chat with them about what formulation. Here you get a specific substance, a specific product. It's a prescription like any other prescription. It's not just here, go away and see what you want to get. So that's very good. And that means that research in Australia, and there have been a number of trials done, there's one underway at the moment called Quest Initiative. There was a Quest 1. The results of that came out literally last month. And that showed, this is a study of over 2,300 people, followed up for 12 months. Again, declaration was done by the University of Sydney. It was supported by Little Green Farmer, but it was a University of Sydney study. Showed improvements in sleep, anxiety, mood, pain, and fatigue. It's clinically significant across a 12-month period. And that data on 2,300 people is quite large. They're hoping Quest 2, which is being done by Curtin University, will be even bigger. So we've got all that right. Our bureaucratic system, as tends to be the case in this country, not so much. And the TGA has this sort of hands-off, hands-on approach that, because it's not an ARTG, so Australia Registry of Therapeutic Goods product, they're interested in the manufacturing standards, but nothing beyond that. And they obviously you don't want to advertise cannabis. It's not like a consumer product. But the way they do it, it can make it quite difficult for people who are genuinely looking for treatment to find doctors who offer it. Like if a doctor puts on their website that they prescribe medicinal cannabis, the TGA will come and knock on their door. Now, okay, we don't want advertisements, but information is useful for people to be able to say, look, this doctor does it. This doctor is a prescriber, this doctor isn't. That helps me. If people can't find you, that is harder for them. There are also, unfortunately, a few cowboy outfits that have sprung up, mainly in the telehealth field. Now, there's a lot of very, very good telehealth clinics, but there are also some cowboys, and there was one group in particular that got into trouble last year. It turned out that they had people on a monthly dispatch basis. So in other words, products were being shipped to people's houses on a regular basis. It all came out because somebody had passed away and a box of medicine still arrived. Now, it's not good. That is bad. But unfortunately, the regulator's been quite slow to act on the cowboy element. Some people are starting to pull their heads in, and that's a good thing. But what we need is sensible regulation that says, yes, we don't want loud promotions, but we want the public to be able to find out where they can get help, and we want the people who are providing the help to be staying within what is applicable and appropriate.
What does that look like in your view? I mean, we don't want to, I get it, we don't want to end up in a situation where, like, the US, where, every second commercial is on some...
Oh, no, I'm not talking about that sort of advertising. Absolutely not.
Yeah, but how do we do that? What's your view on that? How do we advertise that, or how do we get this information to the general public?
Look, I wouldn't even call it advertising. Like, for example, if I had on the surgery website, this doctor does prescribe medicinal cannabis. That's not an advertisement. It's a bit like this doctor does skin cancer checks, or this doctor does, cosmetic fillers, or, so people want to know what the doctor does. And in general practice, there is this view everybody does everything, but no, they don't.
No,
like, for example, I no longer remove skin cancers. I don't do very much of it. It's not my thing. There's another doctor in the practice who does it quite a bit. So he's able to put on the fact that, yes, he does mole scans and skin cancer removals. That's not an advertisement. That's just a statement of fact. That I might prescribe medicinal cannabis is not an advertisement. It's a statement of fact. So factual information should be able to be provided to the public in a it's not like, I'm the greatest prescriber, come and see me. No, this is something I do. You can talk to me about it, is a statement of, it's not an advertisement. So that's the level we need to get to.
I agree. The current regulations in Australia now, in your opinion, do you think it's helped or hurt medical research in this country?
Look, I think it's been reasonably supportive of research. Like a lot of pharmaceutical research is done by industry, and the big pharma companies have very, very deep pockets. These companies have hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. Medicinal cannabis companies are typically small startups, and they don't have deep pockets. So might it be helpful if there were some a different attitude from, say, the NHMRC, National Health and Medical Research Council, to fund some studies? I think that would be helpful. I think they could do more in that space. The universities have been quite interested, but then they're typically interested because they're on the receiving end of the grant money, so fair enough. So look, I think we're doing okay. Probably could do better, but we're doing okay.
Let's talk about the CBD now and THC. The perks of CBD versus THC from all the research currently that we have access to as well. And what is your opinion on that?
They both have a role. They are the two main cannabinoids, CBD, cannabidiol, THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. THC is psychoactive. That is the part, if people use too much, and particularly illicitly, can create a high, and it can make people a little bit sort of foggy or fuzzy depending. But it is very useful for pain relief. It can be helpful in Parkinson's disease and other tremors. It can be quite useful in cancer pain and cancer symptoms. There's a number of roles for THC. It can assist with people getting off to sleep. CBD is not psychoactive, doesn't matter, and it's a Schedule 4 medication. Pure CBD is, in fact, a Schedule 3, which means it could be purchased at the chemist without a prescription, but there are no products that have satisfied the TGA to be available. But if there were, then you could buy it without a prescription. It is not psychoactive. It doesn't matter how much you take of it, you're never going to get a millimetre off the ground. It has an anti-inflammatory effect. It also has overlapping effects with THC, so it can help with pain and with nausea. It's very useful for anxiety. So CBD is very good for anxiety, more so than THC. It helps with quality of sleep, and also can be quite helpful in PTSD. The combination of and that's not an exhaustive list. The combination of the two is often better than. Like the total is greater than the sum of the parts. So THC and CBD will work synergistically or together, and the data does show us that a combination of the two is often best for chronic pain. High CBD, better for anxiety, for migraine prevention. Often high CBD is useful, but medicinal cannabis is a very personalised medication. So is there a one formulation to fit all? No, the answer to that is no. There are logical start points. Both have a valid role, and invariable combinations also have very valid roles. And I will typically say to people, this is where we need to start. It's not necessarily where we're going to finish, because whilst the data informs us as to what makes where is the best place for you to start with taking medicinal cannabis, it could be you need something else. And that is no different, Ray, to if I put you on a blood pressure medication, maybe this particular one, it isn't the right dose. And maybe your blood pressure isn't coming down, and we need to adjust the dose, or it might be this medication is not for you because it's causing you side effects, and we need to change. So the principle with medicinal cannabis is exactly the same as with any other medication. There are over 100 cannabinoids, but the two main ones are the CBD and THC. Yes, there's CBG and CBN and some others, and there's been a bit of work done on Delta 8 rather than Delta 9 THC. A little bit of that, I suspect there's some marketing components to that, especially in North America. Again, not saying that as a criticism, but as an observation. Whilst there are a lot of different products on the market, a lot of those products are very, very similar. So, we can have 22% THC flowers. We could have 24% THC flowers. Yes, they will have slightly different terpenes. Yes, they might have some different minor cannabinoid components. But in terms of how they're prescribed, which is on the basis of their THC and CBD, lots and lots of variations, but ultimately very, very, very similar.
Similar effect and similar.
Yes. So if you've got a 24%, for example, a 24% flower, it's still a 24% flower. Now, I accept totally that some people will say, well, this one is more agreeable to me than that one, for reasons we can't necessarily define. But in terms of its therapeutic effect, it's still a 24% flower.
So there is no, we're not going to discover a magical strain anytime soon that's going to have substantial benefits over what we already know.
Look, that's interesting, and maybe there'll be... Actually, I think there won't be, because that would go against the current requirements. Look, people are always looking for different, to try and do different clones and evolve different strains, and I think that will be interesting. I don't see that there's a lot... Look, who knows? I haven't got a crystal ball, but if the question is, are we likely to see something major emerge out of the blue in the next 5 to 10 years? Look, I would be surprised, but you know what? I haven't got a crystal ball.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some of the misconceptions on medical cannabis that you've heard in the past?
Oh, look, Ray, where do we start? I mean, we have this idea that it's a dangerous substance. It isn't. You cannot lethally overdose on medicinal cannabis. You need to take about 20 or 25 kilograms. It is a safe substance. It's the other myth is that it's highly addictive. Yes, if you use it incorrectly, too much for too long, that yes, you can get addicted. As we spoke before, in weight for weight, it is not a highly addictive substance. The biggest one that really I get on a hobby horse about is that there is no evidence. And you'll hear groups like the AMA and different colleges, and these bods will come out and say, oh, there's no evidence for medicinal cannabis. Yeah, there is. You go onto PubMed, which is the biggest repository of medical studies in the world, and there are over 10,000 studies in there on medicinal cannabis. Now, are some studies better than others? Of course they are. There's a lot of crap studies get done in medicine. In fact, it's estimated that 85 to 90% of medical research is garbage. You don't know that at the start. So yeah, that's a standard. But if you want to argue about the merits of an individual study, that's a very, very different discussion to saying there is no evidence. And by the way, there are probably millions, let alone thousands of people worldwide who have used cannabis and got benefit. Now, either all of those people are having a placebo effect, or they're all lying, or it's working for them. Literally, I had a woman the other week who is being treated and said, I can't thank you enough for having prescribed this. She's feeling better. It's made a difference to her life. Now, that's not going to be everybody. Not everybody's going to get a response, right? I've never had anybody thank me for prescribing them a blood pressure medication or a cholesterol lowering medication. They don't feel any better. It's good, it's going to help them, yep. But nobody ever comes back and says, wow, this has made my life so much better. And this is not everybody, okay? So it's not like a miracle drug for every single person. And any prescriber will tell you this. Where there is a dramatic response, and we do see it, it can be life-changing, and those people benefit. And it is so insulting from big public health and groups like the AMA just to say across the board it doesn't work. How insulting is it to those people? It's appalling.
Yeah, I agree. Joe, I want to talk about vaping versus the CBD and THC applications. What are the main differences, and can we get rid of vaping altogether and just use CBD and THC oils and those kind of products? Is it necessary to have? I mean, what can you get out of vaping, the oil or whatever it is, the product, versus taking it
by mouth?
Yeah.
Right. So you've got oral formulations and inhaled formulations. Orals are typically oil. We are now seeing an increasing number of gummies or edibles coming onto the market, and also capsules. There are not a lot of capsules. The advantage of oil is that you really can fine-tune the dose quite, down to 0.1 of a mil. Oral formulations will get into your body a little bit more slowly. It can take 45 to 60 minutes, but it will stick around in the body for longer. So, for example, for chronic pain, that's very useful. Inhaled formulations, and there are two, which is flour. So it's dried flour. You put it into a vape device. It gets heated up, and again, you inhale it. And I really want to really, really strongly emphasize that is not smoking. We are not burning, combusting any substance. And there are vape carts, which are cartridges which are preloaded with a liquid, which also you heat up and then inhale. And they variably have THC and or CBD. So some of the vape cartridges will be higher in THC, some will be equal parts. Flour, there are some pure CBD flowers. There are probably more THC flowers, and there are flowers with a mix of both.
Well, that's really interesting. You've got you're still inhaling. You've got the flower, and then you have the preloaded cartridges, which
Which are liquid.
It's liquid oil, whatever it is. Is there really a difference, or why are there's two options? You can load up a flower and inhale it, or you can have it in a liquid cartridge.
Look, the advantage, I think it's a little bit to cater to personal preference.
Right, so it is personal preference.
The advantage of the vape cartridges is that for somebody who, particularly people who have never used cannabis, it's simple and convenient. There's no fiddling around, in as much as you don't need to get the flower out, weigh it, put it in your device, heat it up. It's a simpler process. Equally, there are people who prefer flower because you do get a little bit more of the aromas out of the flowers, and some people like that, and that's fine. So ultimately, I suppose it's horses for courses. There are pluses and minuses to both. I think the vape cartridges, there's not as many of them as the flower products. They appeal to a particular market, and particular people who've either never smoked, really never done any inhalation. It's easier for those people, and I think that's, again, the end result broadly the same. It's a bit like, say, was it better to take a tablet or a capsule? Well, the end result is sort of the same. People will have their preferences.
We'll talk about psilocybin now and psychedelics, especially when it comes to mental health applications. Where are we at in Australia with the accessibility for people in using LSD or psilocybin when it comes to treating mental health issues?
Right, so the two that were down-scheduled from 9 to 8, Schedule 8 means it can be prescribed. Schedule 9 is specifically in research capacity only. Are MDMA for PTSD and psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression. They have to be prescribed by a psychiatrist, and it has to be administered in a controlled setting. So you can't just get your script, go to the chemist and go home. You have to be in a clinic setting. So it's like a day clinic. It's not overnight in hospital, with a therapist who is with you for the entire time that it's in your system and you're having your journey and revelations. And that can be 4 or 6 hours or so.
And how accessible is that now to people in Australia? I mean, let's just say I'm diagnosed with mental health or depression or whatever it is, and going down that path will be really beneficial for me. What does that look like for someone like myself or anybody that wants to explore that?
So it's not highly accessible for two reasons. Number one, there are a very small number of prescribers. There are a couple of clinics in Perth and only a couple of prescribers. And number two, it is expensive. You've got to be in with a psychiatrist and potentially a therapist or two for a number of hours. The product is quite expensive. It's
and none of it, not even a portion of it, is covered under Medicare, regardless of your diagnosis or.
No. Now, literally, as we're speaking today, on the weekend, it was reported in the Weekend Australian newspaper that the Department of Veterans Affairs is looking at providing coverage for veterans with PTSD. Now, this has not happened, and all the details are yet to emerge. But that would be the first major coverage. Some of treatment for PTSD in this country with psychedelics. Now, what it looks like, what people will need to do to be able to qualify, that has not been released. And as the cliche goes, the devil can sometimes be in the detail. Medicare, no. Department of Veterans Affairs for certain veterans, and obviously that will be I'm quite certain there will be a fairly rigorous process to determine who is deemed to get benefit from it. So what that's all going to look like, we don't know, but that is actually in process. Is my understanding that could be a world first. I'm not aware of any other country where there is formal insurance coverage of any nature for treatment with psychedelics.
Right,
I could stand corrected.
And this is where I think the regulations in this country that is more hurtful than it is helpful, because we seem to be so far behind the rest of the world when it comes to these types of treatments?
I wouldn't actually agree with you on that, Ray. On these treatments, we are possibly towards the front. Now, I think in Oregon in the United States, I think there are a couple of jurisdictions where they have allowed use of psychedelics.
Switzerland, Finland, you've got Netherlands, you've got... there's a lot of clinics, around that I've seen a lot of famous clinician and doctors that are running all of these treatments.
Some of that, as I've been told, is tolerated more than legal, and it surprised me that even in the Netherlands, apparently it's not legal, but there's no specific law outlawing it. And I was told this by somebody who'd been there and been to a clinic. In terms of usage, yes, in the Netherlands you can buy magic mushrooms on every other street corner. It's not a medical.
No, of course not. But there are clinics that are offering actually treatments by professionals.
We do have those here now. They have started up, as I said. There's one in Perth and one pending.
Right, but it's still very expensive in your view. Yes. I mean, would it be less headaches and cheaper, do you think, for someone that really needs this kind of treatment to look at getting a ticket and going overseas and booking a treatment in one of those clinics, or go through the pain and the inconvenience that they have to go through in Australia?
Yeah, look, I probably can't offer an opinion on that, because necessarily... I don't think, and again, I'm not familiar with some of these clinics in detail, but I suspect they're not necessarily all that cheap either. And then you factor in your airfare and. So I can't really offer an opinion.
No, I totally understand that. So is there any news that you're aware of that we're moving in the right direction for making this more accessible or cheaper? Because we're talking, let's leave the psychedelics for now, and even going back to medical cannabis, it's still not that cheap for someone to go, whether it's even telehealth or not, or whether they go and see a doctor and go through the process, and by the time they end up with the product or the prescription, it's an expensive exercise still.
It's certainly much less expensive than 3 and 5 and 8 years ago. People were paying hundreds, even sometimes more than $1,000 a month for medication. Now people may be paying, again, depending how much or how little they need to use, as little as $100 a month for medication. That really, the prices have come down significantly.
$100 a month.
Yep.
So say for someone, let's just say I've got, chronic back pain, or I've got, sleep disorders, etc., and I need to, and that seems to be the way for me, and I need to go and see a doctor. So how much it will cost me to go through that whole process and end up with the medication that I need?
Yeah, look, again,
before I end up going into that $100, etc., every month.
So prices are going to vary. Different doctors will have their own price schedules, and
on average, you think?
Look, probably a first consultation, again, is going to vary, and also there's total cost and then there's out-of-pocket costs. So, for example, a lot of practices will charge somewhere between $150 and $250 or so for a first consultation. If you're seeing the person face-to-face, there will be a rebate from Medicare, so the out-of-pocket expense, and again, these are very broad figures, Ray, it may be somewhere between $100 and $150 to $200 tops. A lot of telehealth clinics, you don't get a Medicare rebate. You may only pay $99. There are a couple which are very cut price at less than that, and we spoke before about cowboys. If the cost of a consultation is cut too far, then that's not enough to cover the cost of employing a doctor, and what that means usually is that the money is in the product. which makes it more likely that you may be, and again, this is an observation, not saying it applies across the board, maybe more likely to be prescribed more products, and maybe the doctor doesn't have time to make a thorough assessment of your situation, which is very, very important. The net out-of-pocket cost is probably going to be circa 100 and something. We're not talking thousands of dollars. Yeah. And as I said before, the cost of the medication is going to depend on how much you take. So, for example, if you have a 50 ml bottle of oil, if you're taking a ml per day, that'll last you 50 days. If you are taking 2 mls a day, it's going to last you 25 days. The cost of the bottle is the same. So how much it costs you is going to vary. But again, the price of oils have pretty much halved in the last 5 years. But it varies, size varies, length of time varies. So look, it is not PBS. No, it's not on the list where you only pay $7 for a prescription. And certainly telehealth clinics cannot offer Medicare coverage. They are legally barred from doing that because you have to have seen a doctor face-to-face within the last 12 months to qualify for a Medicare rebate. And the complexity, okay, maybe that's not the right word. There is an additional degree of administration and required in prescribing. There's some upskilling. Look, I'll put my hand up. My time is valuable. I'm providing, and other doctors the same, not just me, in a space where there is probably an increased onus and increased watching and a whole lot of other factors. And that takes time, and that time doesn't come for free.
Absolutely,
despite what the PM is trying to say, it doesn't.
Yeah, no, I think that's where it's still, I believe that you would agree with me on that, it's still a little bit expensive for the average patient.
Look, my experience is
there
that...
these days, so you're looking at between anywhere from $200 to $300 out of pocket by the time you end up with your script and being treated, depending on the rebate that you get, and that's still a little bit costly for most people, right?
So there's an initial cost. Going forwards, subsequent consultations are generally less expensive because they take less time.
Right. And
then again, your monthly cost of medication is going to be according to what you need. Can everybody afford it? Look, the answer to that is clearly no. My personal observation is that if people want to do it, and this includes a lot of people in older age groups and pensioners, they seem to, and obviously the people who don't, probably don't come in and request or have consultations. But 2 points, Ray. Number one, what price do you put on your health? And that's for people to decide. It's not for me to decide. Number two, if you've had a whole lot of treatments that have cost you less that haven't worked, and you can take... And again, I'm not saying it's working for everybody, but if it does work versus spending money on what hasn't worked, then that may be better use of your money, but how people view it, that's for them to view it, not me.
I'd have to agree with you there, Joe, that your health is the most important, and there is no price that you can really put.
But I do accept some people. I accept that some people is beyond their reach, but probably less than you might imagine. We have a lot of psychoactive substances. Some are legal, some are illegal, some are prescribed, some are not prescribed. We have far more problems, and it's not just Australia, worldwide, far more problems with prescription medications than illicit medications. And the opioid crisis is probably a good case in point. Way more people have died from prescription opiates than from use of heroin. Cannabis is not a lethal substance. Do we want a free-for-all? No. Can we perhaps learn from what's gone in jurisdictions where it has been legalised or decriminalised? And Canada comes to mind, California, Uruguay, Portugal. Look, I think we can learn from that. And do I think that at some point in the future it may be decriminalised? Yeah, I suspect. And I certainly do not see that we should be putting people in jail for using cannabis. And I think Jimmy Carter, the late ex-president, said our policies around drug use should at a very minimum be no more harmful to the person than the substance itself. Now, are some substances dangerous? Yes, and methamphetamine is at the top of that list. And if I could get rid of anything, I would get rid of methamphetamine because that actually changes people. Absolutely. That's a nasty substance. Heroin is also a nasty substance. It's not the drug of choice at the moment for people. That's why you don't see not saying there aren't problems with it, there are as many problems. Look, psychedelics have significant potential for abuse. I think if there is to be down the track any form of deregulation, I think that has to be treaded. Treaded, is that a word? That needs to be done very, very carefully, because the impacts of psychedelics can be very, very significant. You send somebody off into the clouds and they get behind a wheel of a car. That is not going to end well. So look, do I think that in the future we're going to see some changes? Yes. What will that look like? I don't know.
Thanks, Joe. The last 10 minutes I have of your time, I want to talk about the issues that we discussed, I think now probably 3 years ago, with driving and working. Has that improved at all? Is there any changes that...
Yeah, there has been a change in Victoria. In March, they changed the laws that essentially says if you have a prescription that, and look, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is if you have a prescription essentially and you're not impaired. Now, nobody should be operating machinery or driving if they're impaired in any way. And that doesn't matter whether it's from an over-the-counter hay fever tablet, from alcohol, from any drug of any description prescribed or not. But if you're not impaired, then that you've been prescribed cannabis, you should not be discriminated against. So currently, if you have a prescription for an opiate or a benzodiazepine and you waive that prescription and they've done a drug test on you, then on your way it's fine. If you test positive for
If you're
cannabis,
not impaired, that means that you're in control.
Yeah, so there's nothing
of the
wrong
motor
with
vehicle that you're driving. There's nothing wrong with you. You know, you don't have any speech impairment or anything like that. You look fine.
Yep.
But you...
So if you test positive for THC,
yeah.
you can lose your licence, and in workplace testing, you can lose your job.
Right.
Now, that is discriminatory. So on the road, if you're below 0.05, you're deemed that you're able to drive. Now, it could be argued some people at 0.04 might not be, and some at 0.06 might be. People are different. But there is a line that is drawn. With THC, it can be detected in amounts that would be comparable to well below 0.01. And it's not affecting you in any way. It's on the way out of your system, but you can still be penalised. And that is discriminatory. So Tasmania has laws that puts it on a level playing field with the other medications. Victoria has moved down that path. WA, an upper house committee, looked at it in the previous parliament, and Brian Walker, who's the legalised cannabis MP, he's also a doctor by profession, is going to be pushing quite hard in this parliament. Again, not to say people should be driving when they're impaired, absolutely not, but if they are not impaired, then they should not be discriminated against. What will happen in this state and other states remains to be seen. There appears to be movement, so we've got 2 jurisdictions where they've gone down that path. In due course, hopefully others will as well.
Excellent, Joe. Thank you very much for your time. And until the next time.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks for having me on your program.